Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. In this video I want to talk to you about a very interesting piece of functionality that is built into Emacs. This one is called registers. Registers are special places where you can store different types of data in them, and then you can retrieve that data on demand. You should think of a register as the functional equivalent of your system's clipboard. So the idea with the clipboard is that you copy some text to the clipboard and then you can retrieve it on demand, you can paste it somewhere else. And when you copy some new text, that text will override the old text and take its stead. So this is the same principle with registers. You can always store some data in them, but it's always one piece of data at a time. So if you store some new data, the old one will be removed and the new one will take its place. The difference with the clipboard, with the system's clipboard, is that in Emacs you can store different types of data, not just text. You can, of course, store text in the form of a string of characters, so letters, numbers, spaces, symbols. You can store text in the form of a rectangular area. You can store numbers, which you can then operate on by incrementing them by an amount that you specify. You can store positions in certain buffers. So where the point is in the given buffer, and then revisit that point in that buffer, provided it is visiting a file. You can store window configurations and the buffers that are held in each of these windows. Or you can store frame sets, so frames with their window configurations and the buffers in each of these windows and the point in each of those buffers, and so on. So you can store lots of things in registers, and you can access that data on demand. Depending on the type of the data, you can perform different actions. So if it is text or numbers, you can insert that text at point. If it is a positional parameter or a window or frame configuration, you can recreate, you can revisit that state and recreate that environment. So you can, for example, save the windows as they are now, do something else without these windows, and then come back to this specific layout, very simply. So registers have lots of use cases, and what I want to do here is show you the principles of how to make use of them, with the hope that you will be inspired to read the official manual. You can do that by doing from inside of Emacs Ctrl+HR, then the letter I, and this will prompt you for a topic to search for, and you will search for registers, and it will take you to the specific chapter. And from there, there are more links for you to follow to get a sense of how to use registers, how to incorporate them in your workflow. So what I'm doing now is just a primer, just something to get you started. So the key chord that is common to all key bindings that involve registers is Ctrl+X and the letter R. I will be calling this the prefix. So you will be typing the prefix followed by a character to invoke a given command. Okay? So let's start by the command, the key binding that will save the region that you have, that will save it to the register. So this one over here, I have a highlighted region and I want to save it to a register. I do prefix S and then it is asking me to copy to the register. If you have some registers already stored, it will produce a pop-up with the available registers and a preview of their contents. Otherwise, there will be no pop-up, so you just have to specify a given register to store this in. Now, at this point, you should know what names apply to each register. It can be either a single letter which is lowercase or uppercase. Case sensitivity matters. It can be a number or it can be a symbol. Whatever it is just one character. So let's say I want to store this piece in the character, in the letter A. So I did just that. And then whenever I want to insert a register, I have to invoke this key binding over here. So prefix and the letter I. So let me do prefix and the letter I, and then again the pop-up with the available registers comes up. So if I now press A, which is the register I recorded earlier, it will insert the contents of that register. So that's very nice indeed. Now you may wonder, why should I ever store some text in a register when I could, for example, highlight this and then copy this? You see the command that I ran, copy this to the kill ring. Why not do that? And then I can go somewhere and yank from the head of the kill ring. The reason you may want to prefer registers is because, as I said, the data stored in a register is persistent for as long as you do not override it. So if, for example, you are here and you are, let's say, recording a macro. Okay, let's record the macro, F3. And this macro is taking you to the / and it is deleting the first word. And then you want to insert the text that you have in some register. So I am inserting this text, and then it goes to the new line and does that thing. If I were to do this by relying on the kill ring, it would give me a false positive. It will give me an undesired behavior because it would always be yanking from the head of the kill ring, which would mean that each time I would delete a word, so if I were to delete this and then yank from the kill ring, it would give that word back, which is not what I was interested in. I wanted to insert a specific string. Okay, so that's how you can make use of text registers. That's the basic idea. Of course, you don't have to use registers within macros for them to be useful. You can always have some persistent piece of data. Maybe you have your email address, maybe something longer, some phrase or whatever that you want to reuse, a specific symbol that you want to use somewhere else. Whatever it is that you do, you can always rely on the register being there, and then you can just insert that text by specifying the given register. So that's very nice indeed. Let's have this like this. Now let's move on to the other type of register, which is numbers. You do that with prefix and the letter n. Let's run this, prefix and the letter n. It is asking me to record a number to a given register. I will give it the letter B. So if I try to insert the contents of B, you can see that it has inserted the number 0. This is because I did not specify a number. So if you don't specify a number, it will always fall back to the number 0. The way to specify a number for a number register is to pass a universal argument. So for example, I can do Control U, then 100, and then prefix n, and specify a register. So let me insert now the contents of B. You can see that now the value is 100. When it comes to the universal argument, I have mentioned this several times in my previous videos. If the number that you want to pass is a single digit, you don't have to press Control U and the number. You can just press Control and the number. So let's say I want to have the number 5. Control 5, and then the command to record the number register, and then the name of the register. Again, I stored it in B. So let's insert the contents of B. You can see now that I have the number 5 over there. What you can do with numbers is that you can increment them. If I do, let's have here the key chord for incrementing. So this is for incrementing, okay? Control X, R, and the plus sign. If I do Control X, R, and the plus sign, and then give it the register B, it has now incremented the value in that register. So if I insert now, it inserts the number 6. So by default, incrementation happens in steps of 1. The difference, the amount, is always 1. But if I pass a universal argument, so let's do, for example, let's pass Control U 10, and then run the command to increment. Let's now insert B. So you can see that it has increased by 10. It's now 16. Normally, when it comes to increments, it's not something that you would do in your regular editing. You would rather use this in the context of a macro. So for example, let's first have this, let's reset this to 0 so that it is easier to keep track of it. And let's say that I'm recording a macro now. It does some things, and then it increments the number that I have stored. So let's increment the number by 100, and we do it like this, and then it inserts the number that it has incremented and does some more things, and then moves to the new line. And I close the macro over there. Let's run this macro a few times so you can see how easier it is when it comes to keyboard macros and incrementing text registers. Of course, if you only ever want to increment a single number, you don't have to use registers when it comes to keyboard macros. You can just use the keyboard macro counter. I have showed this in previous videos, but let me show it to you very quickly again. If you are running a macro, so F3, if you press F3 while running a macro, it will insert the keyboard macro counter. You can see in the echo area, it will insert the keyboard macro counter and then increment it by 1. Okay, so you can check my video as well on how you can make use of this. But the idea is that if you press, for example, the universal argument and then F3, if you now insert the counter, you see that it is now the number 100. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Sorry. But the point is with number registers that you can insert a number that you have stored, you can increment it by the amount that you specify, and the great value of this is that you can run a macro that increments more than one number. So let me store another number. Let me store, for example, to the register C. Again, this is the number 0. But let's also store the number 10 to the register B. Let me see if B is there. Okay, so I have 0 and 10. So now let's record the macro. And now let's let's increment C by 1. So I don't have to specify an argument for this one. And then we insert C for this in, let's say, and now I want to increment B by, let's say, 10. Let's do it 10. So I want to increment B by 10 and then insert B, and we do stuff. Okay, we do stuff and go to the next line. Let's see. So you can see now that I am incrementing two different numbers at two different amounts. Okay, so this can become very complex depending on what it is that you are doing. I had one scenario where I was actually incrementing two different numbers at two different amounts, but normally this is a very special kind of functionality. It's good to know about it, but don't try to waste too much time on it, optimizing on it if it is not something that occurs to you, to your work very often. So let's remove this. Let's clean this up so that we can get back to what we were doing. Let's now record a position register. It's the prefix and then space. Okay, so let me show it to you in practice. Let's say that I am here and I want to record this very position that I am in. Let's actually remove the constraint that I had over there. So this is my .emacs, okay? Where was I? Okay, so I am here. Control X R and space, and again I have to specify a register. Let's say that this one is D, okay? So I have stored this specific point in this specific buffer. Now let me kill this buffer. Control X K, and I want to kill that buffer. And let's close that window. So now I want to revisit register D. So I will do, I haven't showed this yet, sorry. So let me show you how you will revisit a specific point. You will jump to that point. So insert applies, so this is insert. Insert applies to strings and numbers, okay? And numbers. Sorry, I forgot how to type. So insert applies to strings and numbers and increment, of course, whereas jump applies to positions or window configurations, which I will show in a bit. So I want to run this, and I want to jump to the register D. Let's do this and jump to D. It is asking me now, actually, let me show it to you a bit slowly. I am running prefix and J, and the pop-up with the registers will appear, and you can see that D, you can see the preview for D. It is giving me the file system path to the buffer with the position that I was in. So if I now type D, it is asking me for confirmation. Should I visit that file given that the buffer does not exist anymore? I say yes, and you can see I am in this specific position over here. Of course, again, this is something that you will use if you are visiting a specific point in a buffer, but there are other ways, of course, to visit a given point using the marks or the mark ring, okay? So for example, if you go one screenful down and you press Control U and then space, Control U and space, sorry, I did something wrong. Okay, let me see again, what did I do wrong? Okay, you have to go further down. Control U and Control space to get back to where you were. This is not reliable anyway, because the mark ring is something that you don't normally keep track of. It's much better, you see I did a mistake anyway. It's much better if you want to record a given position to rely on registers. So that's the idea. Let's come over here and then let's revisit that point, so I am right away where I was. So this is great because you record a specific point in a specific buffer, and even if that buffer is killed, you can go back to it no problem at all. So that's with regard to jumping to a specific to the contents rather of a specific register, and this can come in very handy when you are using this command over here, which records a given window configuration. So let me say that I want to store this specific layout that I have over here. I will do prefix and W, and you can see the prompt window configuration to register. I will say let's give it the letter W. Why not? And now I want to close this. I want to open another buffer, and I want to open this buffer as well. I do some work over here, and now I want to jump to the window configuration I had before. I do Control X, R, and J, and then you can see in the pop-up, in the preview, the letter W contains a window configuration. So I will hit W, and I am back to where I were. Again, this is great, and the same principle, but I will not show it because it involves frames and it might mess up with my demo here, is this one over here. It's prefix and the letter F, and again you give it a specific character which corresponds to the register, and then you can jump to it the exact same way. I guess that's it. Is there something else? Yeah, that's the point, folks. That's all there is to registers. One last point with regard to window parameters or frame sets is that if you are making use, or if you are using the desktop facility of Emacs, which allows you to record the history, the state of your Emacs, and restore that state from one session to the next, and you want to always have a persistent window configuration, you cannot use this one. You have to use this one, Control X, R, and the letter F, because when you do it when you store a frame set, it stores different types of data. It records the files that correspond to buffers, so it is able to recreate that frame in its entirety, whereas this one with the letter W is only useful for every given session. At least in my testing, I'm not sure if there is some variable or some other means of making sure that window configurations, this specific one, registers that contain window configurations, can persist from one session to the next by means of the desktop facility. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check my .emacs for the desktop. I have a link as well. You can find it as well. So this is the principle, folks. You should check, these are the principles. You should check the Emacs manual, read about registers, read about what you can do with them. There are some other things that I didn't show. For example, you can save bookmarks. You can check what bookmarks are. You can use rectangles if this is something that you are using. Normally, I don't use rectangles. There is one exception. I will mention it in a bit. I normally don't use rectangles, so the idea of trying to learn the various commands that involve rectangles isn't really appealing to me. It will be an investment that will yield little to no returns. There is one exception, as I said, with regard to rectangles. Say, for example, I want to insert some text over here in this column. I will do Control X space, then specify the rectangle. So just to make it clear, this is the rectangle. And when I have a rectangular region, I will press Control and T. And now I can insert some text. And by the way, you can also insert a register in here, okay? So let's do just that. Let's insert a register. And let's insert the very first register that we had. So you see what I am doing, and I hit the return key and it inserted that thing. This is the only use case I have for rectangles, basically as a poor programmer's multiple cursors equivalent. But other than that, I don't really use rectangles. However, if you use rectangles, you can also make use of this specific command over here, copy rectangle to register, and there are other commands involving rectangles as well. So that's all there is to it, folks. Thank you very much for your attention, and make sure to practice a bit with registers. The very last thing is that if you find Control X R to be a very cumbersome key cord, and if you are using registers very often, you might want to use something like this to create a shortcut where, in this case, F5 is the equivalent of Control X R, so you could press F5 and I to insert a register, for example. I'm not using this, but I have it over here in case someone else wants to make use of it. That's all for now, folks. I will link to my .emacs, even though there isn't much for you to copy with regard to registers, but I will link to it in the description in case you want to see anything. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice day. Goodbye.